Welcome to Unlocked. I'm Dr. Joel Swakowski. In this show, we explore how truth comes to life through real stories and real people. Today, I'm joined by my friend Simon Nielsen, old friends, and we've worked closely together in church for many years. I'm excited for all of you to hear his story. It's very compelling. And yeah, he's also one of the funniest guys I know, too. So let's dive in. Hey, Simon.
Hello, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Yep, just got done with my morning coffee, ready to go.
Nice. So, in prep for this interview, I recognize we've known each other since 2006.
Oh, you recognize that?
So, let's see how good your math is. How many years is that?
19.
So, how many years have we been friends?
I think we're just getting there, don't you?
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, definitely not 19.
Yeah, I feel like we were, and then we lost about 8 or 9 years when I moved away, and now we're getting there again.
Getting there
But
again, aren't we? Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
you're
dude,
the worst.
great to have you on the show. I know you have an awesome story. You and I mean, we've known each other for 19 years. We've for a lot of those years been involved in either home church ministry or Music of Life Church, and
Yeah.
been involved in leadership together in some capacity for a lot of that. But yeah, I'd love to just take some time to learn more about your story. I know a lot of what you've been through resonates with a lot of the frustrations Christians have today, and yeah, man, your story is always really compelling to hear. So, what was it like growing up in the northeastern Wisconsin area for you?
Well, I was just saying this to my wife, Elena. I was just telling Elena, you know, I love my life. It's going great, but I was literally born half a mile from where our house is and where I live. So it's uh it's going great, but it's not going very far at all.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
yeah, what
live
was
in
it?
the house I grew up in, and like
Yeah,
two houses down from the house I lived in before that. So yeah.
quit
Nice.
bragging.
Yeah.
But yeah, 'cause growing up in Wisconsin, yeah, it was great. I liked it, but yeah, I guess for the purpose of this interview, I'll kind of talk about my church experience when I was younger and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so I grew up, had one brother, a half brother, my mom and dad. Um, so it's like a real typical Wisconsin American, you know. We had a house. My dad owned a steel erecting company, so he was a construction worker. My mom was, just um, house mom, house mother, took care of us and raised us. I'd say that like if there's something unique, although it's not that unique to Wisconsin, my dad was definitely a heavy drinker. He was a pretty big alcoholic, which I have some really funny stories. And I also have some very traumatic ones that I've learned to make funny. So, uh, but yeah, so I grew up in a fairly stable household, but besides my dad's drinking, um, and basically my parents, I always knew my parents were, call it believers, like that God was always a part of their life. They would talk to me about it. We would go to church on and off, usually just um, at holidays, Easter and Christmas and things like that. And I think my first memory is there was a church called Christ the Rock, and it was right downtown Appleton, close to City Park. And I think at that time, just from what I now know is their history, I didn't know it then, so I would have been 4 or 5. Um, and that was where we'd kind of go when we did go to church.
Yeah.
And there was periods we'd go there fairly often. My brother was in a play there. So I'm so young. I just have like Polaroid snapshots of memories from being there. But one of them specifically is I must have been just, 4-year-old being loud, crying, whatever, bored. So my dad took me out of the service. We went and got donuts, and we sat on the it was like an old church with the stained glass. There were steps that went up to the front door, like big giant steps, and we just sat on the steps while everybody was in church eating donuts. And so that was my one of my first memories of church.
And that's when
But
I really started to fall in love with church.
yeah, and that's also when I started to learn to eat my feelings.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
which has been another lifelong struggle that I'm currently losing.
Yeah.
But, but, but yeah. Anyway, so I had some good memories at church, but we'd always bounce around. So like, we'd go in spurts. So I think after that, I forgot the next church we went to, but it was a guy my dad worked with invited us, and we started going to his church for just a little bit. And that was the church I remember, I would, in the traditional sense, got saved at. I
Okay.
remember being 6 years old. It was just my mom and I at service. That just the two of us had gone for whatever reason, and they did like the whole. I don't know if I'd call it an altar call, but they had like volunteers, so they gave like the message, and then the whole damnation and going to hell, and if you just accept Jesus. And I remember that you were supposed to raise your hand, and one of these people would come over and sit with you if you wanted somebody to walk you through this. And I remember telling my mom, like, I want to get saved, I want to do this, and raised my hand. The woman came over, and this woman was great. We prayed. I did like the sinner's prayer, that whole traditional thing. And I do remember now looking back, and I've thought about this a lot. I do remember, so I was like 6, 7 then. I remember being 8, 9, 10, like, and feeling like something did change in me. Like I did have this sense of right and wrong all of a sudden. Like I was feeling, worse about things than I normally would have. And so I do feel like something spiritually shifted there, something happened. And, even though I was so young, and but then like I said, we we stopped. We didn't go to church much, and and my parents. I always felt loved by my parents, but they weren't real strict, which I loved. I could kind of watch whatever I wanted from whatever age I was at. Never really had a curfew, um, and but because I had that part of me that was still looking for something, still felt this pull towards God. I had a friend from the time I was 6, and we'd fall out of touch, then get back in touch. And I started skateboarding when I was in my teenage years, and I ran into him at a skate park. He invited me to youth group. It was like a big rally at a different church than his own church for like all the teens in the area, and it was like a rally before like the national see you at the pole day. Do you know
Okay.
what those are? Yeah, where all the students would get together before school starts at whatever school you went to all around the country, and you'd all just have like a half hour of prayer time all together. And and so they had this big rally to get everybody, like, I would say, emotionally jacked up to like go into the day and win souls for Christ at school the next day.
Yeah.
And I remember loving it. And I remember that there was this worship band that they had hired to play. It was playing all these songs, and they were like a Christian rock band, but they were called Breathing Machine. And it was the lead singer was this guy Corey Chisel, and so I remember that, and I ended up playing music with him years later in a very, I would say, non-Christian orientated
Yeah.
band.
Yeah.
but but Corey and I would end up we got to be pretty good friends, and the reason that was we both bonded over like falling away from the church, kind of being disenfranchised, kind of like um, just having these issues and having like these real life questions that we didn't ever get answered. So that was actually something I bonded over with him when I actually met him about 6 years later after that night. But anyway, so I would go to church on and off, and that's when the church, my friend Adam, who had invited me to this thing, he went to a small Baptist church in Appleton, and so I started going to youth group with him, and his parents would come pick me up. Uh, I go to youth group on Wednesday nights. We'd hang out, and I liked it. I really liked it. I like it. It felt like I had purpose. I started listening to all this like Christian music, going to the Christian like rock festivals in the summer, and then eventually when I was 16 or 17, joining like a Christian metal band that we would tour with and stuff. And but I remember like obviously there was bits and pieces before this, but I remember, once I hit that 12, 13-year-old age and I started going to this Baptist church, there was one moment specifically. Like this is when I was really trying to figure life out. And I feel like that's the age that, you preteen, teenager, beginning of that is when you are like you're really trying to get a feel of like what is this all about? You're out of that like Saturday morning cartoon. You can only see the next moment in front of you, and you start to see things a little bit bigger. And
It's like a new heightened sense of self-awareness happens around that age where you start like expressing who you are and
yeah, realizing your
I'm my own
shortcomings.
person. I'm not just the person my parents told me I am. Yeah.
Yeah, I realized you started to piece together all the ice cream when you come home after school. It's starting to add up, and you just, what the hell is this? Just noticing lumps and rolls where it wasn't before. Yeah,
Yeah.
so like you said, yeah, this whole new self
Yeah, like I
awakening.
said, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I remember I started to have these questions, and I'd go to youth group, and I was really trying to figure them out. And we'd always have like a teaching, and like somebody like the youth pastor or one of the volunteers would play a few worship songs on the acoustic guitar, and we'd all sing, and that's where I like started learning all the like classic worship songs. And then, we'd play a game or something, we'd play kickball, and then we'd break up into small groups, and we would get to like, a few people in a group, and there'd be a leader in every group. And we'd have discussion about whatever the teaching was that night. And looking back, just talking about it now, I haven't really thought about this, but it was a really cool way to do that. It was a really cool way to do, I feel like, to do a youth group because it is that age where you're trying to piece stuff together and becoming self-aware and to give a safe place for people to talk out questions about whatever they just learned, all of that. So that was really cool. But I remember this was when I really started to feel like I noticed contradictions,
Yeah.
like in what I was being taught.
Yeah.
And there was one thing specifically, and and I know there was probably much more than that, but one thing specifically one night, the group leader that was in our group he had gone to seminary, like he wasn't a pastor there, but he had like all the qualifications to basically become one if he wanted. So this was somebody I looked to as like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I remember after the teaching, I had a question, and the question was, uh, I said, so if I understand this, God knows everything I'm ever going to do, and I'm already forgiven for it. And he was like, yeah. And I remember being like,
Oh, really?
and being like, just thinking
Free
like, all
pass
right, all the masturbation I've done for the last 2 years since I figured out what that was.
and will
I'm
ever do.
Yeah, like I don't have to worry about, yeah, exactly. Like, well, now this is happening.
Yeah.
And
I see why people like this Christianity thing.
right, yeah, no kidding. Wow, it really does wash all the sins away, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And and but there's so much like, that in and of itself, I don't believe makes sense if you really stop to think about it. but there's so many implications from that as well, and so for me, it's just, that gets into like predestination. It gets into all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, so basically, as I went there for a while, and then I ended up going back to what, like I said, I joined like a Christian metal band when I was 16, 17. Uh, and I went back. So I had this new group of friends kind of when I got into high school, but they were all Christian kids. And so I started going to their church, for youth group and Sunday morning services sometimes. I was playing on the worship team for the youth group. Um, and it was back at Christ the Rock, this church I had gone to when I was real young. Now they were in, like, they'd become like, at that point, they were the biggest church in Appleton.
Was that when it was still in Menasha, or they moved to a bigger building at that point yet? They moved
Yeah,
on Appleton Road.
they were at the place they're at now, the real big one.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Because there
yeah.
was a time period they moved. I was just wondering because there was actually a time period where we were probably going. Our families were probably going there at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I always forgot that you went there.
Yeah,
Forgot where you were talking, or I was listening to some podcast or something, and I remember you talking about that, and
that was
I
like our
never knew.
family church too. Like when I was a teenager, that's where my mom would bring us when we'd go the 3 or 4 times a year. Well, when she'd
Oh,
make
sure.
us.
Okay. Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
when I finally in my 20s, I started going back there again. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And so most of high school, I would say I went there, and then there's other place too that some of my other friends went to, was a church called Appleton Alliance, and so I'd go to those youth groups, and I'd go to Sunday morning services with my friends and stuff. My parents still weren't going, but they loved that I was going, and that's, I would say, that's where I feel like I continued to learn. Like everything I was being taught just made less sense, but it still felt really, really, really good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was willing to overlook all the things inside me that were like, wait a minute. So if that's the case, then that would also imply and mean this. All those little things I was feeling and thinking in the back of my mind, I would just push them down uh, because knowing I'm forgiven for everything I'll ever do feels a lot better than going, no, you have some responsibility here still. Like your actions aren't predetermined.
Right.
Um, yeah. So I would say I'd like continued to learn this, like what I would say is pretty much foundational modern day Christianity, which I believe appeals to emotion a lot and things like that. And then, so the big turning point for me though, when I started to like not be able to look past all those things, was when I was 16 and my dad passed away. And that was surprisingly not directly, at least, related to his drinking, which I thought between that and the smoking, uh, that was going to get him. But he had a brain aneurysm, and so it was completely unexpected. So it wasn't anything slow or drawn out. And so all of a sudden, like the snap of a finger, it felt like, my the safety net has kind of gotten ripped out from underneath me. And now I really have to figure out life, because now it's just me. My mom was great. My mom was loving, but she was in her own world of pain, and she had been for quite a long time, just dealing with bearing so much of the responsibility at home because of my dad's drinking and stuff. So she kind of went her own way. I started spiraling my own way. And all I mean by that is, like, I started staying out really late, 3 in the morning, whatever. And it was, again, all my friends were Christian kids. We weren't doing drugs. We weren't running around drinking, but we were running around stealing sunglass huts and stuff, like giant things that people were throwing away, going to the top of parking ramps and throwing it off the top of parking ramps.
Good,
So
clean fun.
yeah, good clean fun. So we were mischievous, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but that's when it was really like, okay, now I do have some questions and I need to get them answered this time. And I remember meeting with my youth pastors at both churches, both those churches I named, and they were amazing. Like they were amazing in that they were so good at hearing me, so good at letting me cry, letting me feel everything I was feeling, uh, just being really compassionate, for to a 16-year-old kid whose dad just died. And that was amazing, and I'll always be so thankful for that and to them for that. But I just wanted to know why that happened. How does this work? Because now the whole predestination, everything's predetermined. God makes everything happen. God's all powerful, so he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, which means God could have saved my dad from dying, right? So why didn't he? And just not getting any answers that made sense, and just being told, or it being implied, like, it's hard, life is hard, but we just have to have faith that whatever God's doing, it's for a really good reason. But nobody could tell me why. Like, and when you're in that much pain, you have a hard time seeing the good reason for the
Right.
pain you're in.
Yeah.
And I remember by the time I was 18, I tried to, like, because at that point I was asking these questions, wasn't getting good answers, but I would go to church, I'd hang out with my friends, and I'd watch these other adults and these pastors, like people I looked up to, and they seemed convinced about all of this. And it didn't seem like they had the same questions that I did. And so I just thought, you know, I just thought I needed to fake it till I make it. Like someday, I remember just thinking, someday this is all going to click. I'm going to hear the one or two things I need to put this puzzle together finally, because I really believe this puzzle must be like, it must make sense. I'm just missing the pieces. And I never found the missing pieces. And so
Yeah.
the puzzle just never finished and it never made sense. And so I left. I just stopped going to church.
Because
And that's right.
eventually too, the just have faith, just pray more, just spend time with God, just read your Bible. Eventually, even those answers turn into we just can't know.
Right. Oh,
We're
yeah,
not supposed to
exactly.
understand.
Yep. Yeah. If
So
God
that's
was,
where it's like, okay, so you're holding out hope, Simon, of like eventually this is all gonna click. And then
yeah,
these people you look up to whose job it is to help you get the answers you're asking about literally are telling you you're not supposed to know the answer. It won't ever click for you, Simon.
right. Yeah. Not until we get to heaven.
Right,
And I just have to have, quote unquote faith.
right.
And, uh, yeah. And so I left, and that was right around the time I met Corey, who was like, they were in the same spot. They were making a really good living, making a lot of money, him and his band, traveling around playing at churches. Some of these big churches pay really well to have some cool young band come in and make God seem really hip and cool to
Yeah,
all the youth. And they were making a good living doing that. And at some point, Corey went through the same thing where he's like, I can't keep doing this.
right.
I feel like I see so much hypocrisy. I can't keep doing this. And so he stopped, and he started a different band, started making the music he wanted to make. And that's kind of when I met him, and we bonded over all that stuff. And yeah, and so I started playing drums for him when his drummer left. And and for the next like 2 years, I think that was my life. And that's when I had this like, okay, well, the God thing didn't work out. Living this clean, do-gooder life didn't work out. So now I'm going to try this other thing. And, we started going to strip clubs quite often. Uh, that's when I started drinking. Uh, and that's when it was like, like I've implied multiple times, I've always battled with weight. So I'll get really big and then I'll lose a bunch of weight. And I did that like once during high school, lost like 80 pounds or 100 pounds, and then did that again a little while later after high school because I'd gained so much weight after my dad died. Again, just eating my feelings and eating my weight in Taco Bell grilled stuffed burritos. But do you remember the 90s? And
Oh, dude, yeah. Grilled stuffed burritos were a game changer.
oh, you remember the commercial? The commercial they'd where they'd hand it off to like whoever was in the drive-through, and the whole car would tip because the burrito was
Because of how
supposedly
heavy it
so
was.
heavy. Yeah,
Oh, such an American philosophy there, isn't it?
yeah.
These burritos are good because of how much food's in them.
How much food is in them?
Uh,
Yeah,
just
but
had one yesterday, anyways.
yeah. So yeah, so like anyway, so because of that, I never had any confidence in myself because I was basing all my confidence off of what I looked like, and and so for me a big one thing for that was my weight. And so I was like, I want a girlfriend like that, finally going to get a girlfriend, get a cool car, move out, live on my own. All these things are going to like then I'll be happy. And so I did. I moved out, got an apartment like right downtown Appleton. Um, Lost a bunch of weight, was running all the time. Uh, and then I got a girlfriend, and and I got all of those things like pretty close together, all within a few months of each other. And I got it all, and I was more miserable because this was my last option of being happy, and I was freaking miserable. and and so I just crashed. I remember I got into just like a fight with my girlfriend at the time because she was going to Christ the Rock. She was going to one of the churches I had went to, and fell away from, felt like it didn't help me. And she gave me an ultimatum, like either you start going to church with me or we have to do like a one-on-one Bible study together. And
Okay.
but it was one of those, if I wanted to date her, those were my options.
One of the options wasn't or we break up. It was just either go to church with me or do a Bible study with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Quite the
and
ultimatum.
it was like yeah. And it was just like I did not want to go back to that church.
Yeah.
And and so I was like, yeah, let's do the Bible study because I knew I could, you know, push my way through that. And just anyway, so we started doing that, but that required me to be more vulnerable with her and honest. And we'd end up getting in all these fights because I was just pointing out all this the seemingly this all the contradictions I saw. And so we'd end up in a fight about that. And so then I was like, well, screw this. Let's just go to church then, because I don't have to share what I believe. I can just sit there and get through it, whatever.
Act like I'm paying
Um,
attention.
yeah, yeah, because I can put in my time for an hour and a half a week as long as we get to keep making out for 3 hours every night. And so like, and so yeah, so I did. But anyway, but it was in a way it was kind of cool because I got all these things they didn't make me happy, and I was kind of thrust back into the same environment that I was like, and so it sped all that up, my spiraling down. And one night we got into this big argument. I it we were 20 years old. It was something stupid, I'm sure. And it felt like maybe we were going to break up, and so that was like devastating to me. And I stayed we were up till like 2 in the morning. And then I was working at Starbucks at the time, and I had to open. So I had to like be there by 5 or something like that. So I got like an hour of sleep, maybe.
Yeah.
And so now I'm uber emotional because I'm on no sleep and I'm in the middle of this fight and I'm like depressed. And we had this guy come in. He was a regular there. He always come in really early in the morning. So if you open the store, you'd see him at 5:30. Big guy, like not like overweight really and not tall, but like thick. Like you would not want to get in a fight with this guy at the bar. And he was retired military. He had been, I don't know how you say it, in charge of a platoon. Like what would you say
Yeah, that
for,
works. Depends
yeah,
on the branch, so different names, different. But yeah, that works.
yeah. But like, in Afghanistan, because this
Yeah,
was like early 2000s, early to mid 2000s. And so he had seen a lot of stuff. Like you knew this guy had seen a lot of stuff, but he was still funny. He was still cool. And now he like sold heavy duty machinery, like construction machinery equipment. And he came in, he'd get a large coffee with 2 shots of espresso in it, black,
oh yeah,
like
no, no
just,
nonsense coffee.
yeah, no BS, just man's
Yeah,
man, like through and through. And so we had gotten to know each other just on a superficial level, just because he'd talk with people when he came in. And because it was so early, he was usually the only one in the store. And so that morning, he just, I don't know what it was. I'm sure I was wearing all my emotions on my face, but he ordered his coffee and then he goes, "Simon, are you okay?" And I lost it, like just broke down, started crying. Like all it took was just anybody to ask me genuinely how I was really doing. And I finally just broke. And he goes, "Come here." And I like walked around the counter and he just held me. Like we were just in the lobby. I was sobbing. He's just got his arms around me, holding me. And man, every time I always get choked up every time I think about this. And he just kept saying it. It's going to be okay. It gets better. It's going to be okay. And and he goes, he goes, "Can you? Is there anybody you can call to work the rest of your shift? Like, do you have people to talk to?" And he goes, you should get somebody to cover your shift, and you should, you can't be here. Like you're and so I called, whoever was working with me that morning, those poor bastards, because they're just all on their own because their
yeah,
coworkers losing it and melting down,
yeah.
and now they
For
got to
sure, they're
drive.
telling this story from a very different point of view, right?
Yeah, they have
This
drive through.
jackass I worked with just left us hanging, bawling his eyes out in the lobby. What the hell?
They have the drive through the hot cold bar and the lobby all of a sudden. And so I'm calling I called this my friend, or not friend, yeah, I guess friend, David, this real old guy. He was retired. He was just working there, I think, to have something to do. He was one of those
Really
older
social
guy.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, very social, and it was just something for him to do, and he just loved it. It kept him busy. Um, and I said, "I'm not doing good. I just had a breakdown. Like, can you please cover my shift?" He said, "I'll be right there." And he came in and worked the rest of my shift. But when he got there, he goes, "Simon, I want you to leave. I want you to call the doctor. I want you to make an appointment to see somebody. And when I get done today, I'm going to call you. I'm going to make sure you did that." And so I did, and he goes, "Do you have somebody you can be with?" I said, "Yeah, I can go to my brother's house." So I went over to my brother's house. I called the doctor. Um, and, the doctor was like, what, what's wrong? What do you need to make the appointment for? I said, "Depression." And they said, "Okay, well, are you suicidal?" And I was like, "I mean, no, I don't think so." And they're like, "Okay, we can get you in about 6 weeks. Does that work?" And I was just like,
And this
I,
is
I,
19. This is 19 years ago.
yeah, yeah, this is
It's even. I mean, you imagine today
this
that
is
same phone
2006
call,
or yeah,
right? That same
2006,
phone call is like a 6 week. That waiting list has only increased in 20 years, right?
yeah, probably. Well, I don't know, because we do have the best healthcare system in
Oh,
America,
yeah.
if you have enough money.
Yeah.
But like I
Nice.
said, I was working at Starbucks, so
Yeah.
yeah, so 6 weeks was going to be it, and so David, my friend, got done with the shift. He called me. He's like, do you have a doctor's appointment?" I said, "Yep." I called, and he said, "Okay, when is it?" I said they couldn't get me in for 6 weeks, and he goes, "What?" And he goes, "Did you tell him that it was for depression?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's not going to do." And he goes, "I'm going to call you back." And his wife, I think, was still a nurse at that time, just part time at the hospital, or she had just retired. I don't remember which, but basically, she put in a call, um, told people at the healthcare system, whatever hospital system it was, um, what was going on. And David called me back and he said, "I have an appointment for you in 30 minutes. I'm coming to pick you up. Where are you?"
Oh, and he picked you up. Damn.
Yeah. So this is like now the third person, him, my brother, and this guy that was holding me in the lobby, just in like the span of 4 hours, that are going way out of their way to try to help me and be there for me. And so he comes, picks me up, takes me to the appointment. The doctor like goes, "Okay, you're gonna need to see somebody, but I am gonna prescribe, whatever the probably just whatever like the go-to run of the mill starter antidepressant is."
Yeah.
So I so then David took me to get the prescription filled. I started taking antidepressants that day. We go I go home, start taking these antidepressants. Well, that was all around the same time that I had just met you, I think. And I'd met you through your brother, uh, Nathaniel, who Nathaniel and I had played music together, and we'd gone to Christ the Rock together, and that's how I met him. Well, he knew I wasn't doing good. We had kept in touch, and one night we were hanging out, and I told him how depressed I was, and he invited me to this Thursday night hangout group, and that's when I met you, and you were going there, and that's when you were
I had that
not
same
the person.
breakdown. I had that same breakdown you had in Starbucks in a
Uh,
booth at Perkins. The whole
yeah,
time I'm sitting there through tears saying, "But I'm fine, but I'm fine, but I'm fine." Just
yeah.
like perfect.
Man, yeah. So yeah, you and I met each other at like our lowest points, and but it was interesting because there'd always be like 6, 7 guys, and I knew most of them already, at least on a acquaintance level, and we were all at this like low point, some type of low point in our lives. And so all these things were is we'd get together, share about how shitty our lives were, and you know, and it just felt good to just even talk about it.
Right.
And and we were all like helping each other, but I like at that time even the biggest help was just having a place to share what was going on.
Yeah,
And
and the answer, a lot of it was that emotional, we're connecting with each other emotionally and helping each other in that way, but
yeah,
we also weren't getting you know, the flawed answers that we were getting from the church. Even before we got like the big answers that helped us,
yeah,
we were around a bunch of guys who weren't just telling us to have faith and just to keep praying and
yeah,
things, you just can't understand these things, right?
yeah. And that's like, and I remember coming into that group and I knew everybody there had like I'd either gone to church with them or I knew that they went to church or were still going to church. And I remember telling everybody there, like, I'm done with the God thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
I'll share, but like I don't want any of that.
Yep.
Like, don't try to help me with that. And John Lenhart, who obviously you co-authored the books with and stuff, but he was in that group, and I remember I had met John briefly at this church, San Damiano, we were going to, and I hated him. Like I just was like, because that was a very postmodern Christian church. Like we all bound together over the fact that God was so beautiful and a mysterious that we could never understand him. And isn't that great? That was like the core theme of that church.
Yeah.
So it was great as far as like being compassionate and emotional to people who'd been hurt by church, but it didn't help you actually make any progress from my experience. But so this guy came in, the scientist guy, John Lenhart, and he acted like we could know some things for sure. I was like, who the hell is this guy? And where does he get off? Like, what does he know? I was like, I thought we left the other churches so he didn't have to listen to crap like this
Yeah.
because there isn't any actual answers. Isn't that beautiful? And so he was in this group, but he was way cooler than I remembered him being. And he was like just real down to earth. And, and
Yeah, he's the one who'd give us like, okay, next week when you come, think about like 3 of your favorite movie scenes over this week, and let's talk about them next week.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
things like
exactly.
that, where it's just like, let's just get the throwing, causes to for us to just connect over.
Yeah, it was, he gave like some form of structure to a very
Right.
unstructured group,
Right.
which which helped it feel more purposeful. And like uh yeah, and he was going through all of his personal issues in his marriage and
Yeah.
with work. And so we were all going through stuff. Anyways, so he like I'm going and I start hearing one of the things that he's going through and one of the other guys there is going through is this like all this drama over this manuscript that John had written called Modeling God. And I'm hearing because these guys were still involved in going to San Damiano, and the pastor at that church had been my youth pastor at Christ the Rock, and he had left. So he was one of the guys I was super close to for that sat. I'd go to his house at midnight, 1 in the morning, wake him up, and he would just sit with me while I cried. Like he was super there for. And now I'm hearing that him and all these people are pushing back and potentially like I don't know if it's kicking people out of the but there was all this drama. And then finally I was like, what is this book about? Like, why does everybody hate you right now? And he just said it's about trying to understand who God is and how to hear from him better. I just remember thinking like, isn't that like what their whole, I don't want to say business, but their whole deal is? Like, isn't that what a church is? Like, what's the issue? Like, it just baffled me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got enough help going to this group where I was starting to feel like I was starting to climb out of a hole. And every week wasn't, as long as I went on Thursday nights, I'd have a better week than when I'd skip it for whatever reason.
Yep.
And so I like these guys earned, John and Andrew, all these guys kind of earned my trust. And I was like, okay, these people can actually help me. And it's not by just quoting a Bible verse at me. In fact, they're not even talking about God at all when they're helping me with my issues. And they're not telling me what to do. They're just helping me talk it out and decide what I want to do. So eventually, I just, at the end of one of the hangouts, I just said to John, like, no, I turned to your brother, Andrew, who Andrew had kind of started becoming one of my mentors, I feel like. And I said, I'm willing to give God one more chance. Should reading this book be that chance? And he just said, I can't say that for sure, Simon, but this is what I feel like I've learned from it and helped make God make more sense finally. And so I asked John for a copy, and he brought me a copy of the manuscript, and I had it for like 4 months, and he kept bringing me new copies. And I never read it, and I kept saying, John, I haven't even read the one you gave me last time. I said, that's fine.
He fixed a word or two and then
Yeah.
reprint out 300 pages of loose leaf paper for
And
you.
hand it to me in a manila envelope, and which I still have those. And like, and but yeah, so anyway, so one night I was again like at a low point, and I was in my apartment, mattress on the floor in the bedroom, didn't have any
Yeah,
real furniture.
living the dream, right? Remember
Oh,
back when you had your own place and a girlfriend and well, your apartment was a mattress on the floor? Uh,
yeah, mattress on the floor, black and
Next
white
time you tell this
Springsteen
story,
poster.
maybe paint that picture a little clearer. It wasn't so glamorous, huh?
Yeah. So I no, but it was great. Those were great times.
Yeah.
And but I remember just crying and screaming out at God, who I supposedly didn't believe in.
Yeah.
Like, But that was what was wrong. Is that looking back now, it's like I did believe that there was a God. I always did. I just felt like he must be full of shit because it doesn't make sense and you can't understand him. So where does he get off putting all these expectations on us? And like, why did he create us if we're just miserable and just run around killing each other? And so I screamed out. I said, "You said seek and you shall find, and I haven't found anything. Like, just you're a liar." And as soon as I said that, it was the first time I felt like I can say, I feel like I definitely heard from God. And it was a question, and the question was, "What have you done to seek me?" And I knew, like, I instantly knew what that meant because it didn't mean just like, have you read your Bible lately? Like, it wasn't anything like that because I could have been, if I wanted to justify myself, I could have gotten so angry at that question of like, are you kidding me? You know how many times I went to church? You know how many times I did this, did that? But what I felt like I knew it immediately meant was like, and I stopped crying. I just laid there like this because it was like, whoa, what was that? And I felt like what God was saying is like, you've listened to all these authors, all these people tell you who I am and how you can't. What have you done to figure out what you believe for yourself of who I am? Like,
Yeah.
stop listening to all. If you think these people are full of it, then stop listening to them.
Yeah.
But do you know who I am? And so I didn't have a Bible in my house. I didn't have a smartphone. I still had a old Motorola flip phone that might have had like a camera in it. I don't remember, but I had that stupid freaking manila folder of a manuscript sitting next on the floor next to my mattress. And so I opened it and I read the preface. That's all I read that first night. And the preface was this whole, party analogy. And it's basically saying if if God is real and the Bible is real, then it wouldn't be just of any God to try to not be able to explain himself. Like if we're supposed to, get to this party, meaning heaven or whatever, then there's got to be an objective way to get there and know you're on the right track. And there's this beautiful analogy of, you know, getting directions at blah blah blah. But it was saying we don't have a fundamental, like foundational explanation of how to have the life that Jesus claims we're supposed to have. And that go like all these churches promise that they'll help you have. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like this is the first time, like it didn't give me the answer, but it recognized and pointed out the issue that I felt the whole time I was going to church. And it was like perfect words to feelings. And I put it down. I didn't read anymore. I read 6 pages. That was enough for me. Uh, but I just felt so settled. And it was just like, thank God, at least somebody sees sees what I see.
Yeah.
And and so I called John the next day and I said, "Hey, I started reading it. I loved the preface." He goes, "Okay, read read the next chapter and call me after each chapter and let's talk about it." And he's like, "And please, if there's anything that doesn't make sense, tell me. Like I want to fix this. If there's anything that's you think is wrong, tell me. I want to fix it." He's like, "You don't have to agree with it. Like let's figure out what's right." And every chapter I'd call him, God started to make more and more sense. It felt objective finally, and all this stuff about like all the questions I had started to get answered and started to melt away. Like
Sovereignty, predestination, the omnis,
faith,
all that stuff.
grace,
Yeah.
all of it. Like and this sounds so stupid. One of the biggest I remember going because one of the things I always wondered is like if God can do whatever He wants and is all powerful, can do whatever, why did He need to kill His Son in order to save us? That was like one of the big ones to me.
Yeah.
Is it made no sense. It's like,
Yeah.
what is the point of that story? It's beautiful, it's poetic. This guy comes and saves the world by taking on the sins of the world, but how does that make sense? Why does one guy dying take away the sins of the world? And
Right.
it's just like, well, because he was God. And it's like, who cares? Like,
Right.
how does that make sense? And so it explained that in a
Yeah.
way that was like logical,
Yep.
of like, yeah. And so,
Not too big for us to understand, but
right.
simple.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so by the end of that book, going one chapter at a time, getting to discuss it. By the end of the book, so this is like 3 or 4 months, I think, at this point where I've been on antidepressants. I just stopped taking them. I weaned myself off of them. So I never even like ended up going to a counselor at all. And I weaned myself off of them slowly. And it was just like, and I'd never been happier in my whole freaking
Was it
life.
John? Did John tell you to stop taking them?
Yes.
Yeah. No. He might not even have known you were on them at the time.
I think he did, because I shared that with him, because that's when I was first really starting to get to know him. And I think I'd shared with you guys, like I
You were
ended up,
starting to take some emotional risks, and yeah.
yep. And I told you guys about the meltdown I had at Starbucks and all that,
Yeah.
and that I'd gotten on depression meds. And I remember like, all I remember all John at, like, he was super interested. He's like, so what does it feel like?
Yeah. Wanted to
Like,
know what it does to you.
yeah. And I just remember going, it doesn't feel different. It just feels like everything's slowed down.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. So I couldn't run forward with all these thoughts and just ramp myself up and get depressed, and life is never going to get better, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It just slowed everything down, which was great. And looking back, it's like I probably would do it again, just because it like slowed me down enough where I could start to actually do one thought at a time and get all the way to the end of it.
And start getting the truth you needed, right? Because
Right.
what's going to happen then is your brain, once you start getting the truth instead of all these contradictions, your brain starts operating at its more optimum level. So now the medication slowing it down is preventing you from actually you're not preventing yourself from going too fast anymore. The medication is slowing you down too much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it would make sense then your natural inclination would be like almost like, so what is it? Is there a moment you remember thinking, oh, I don't want to take medication anymore? Or was it more just like I don't feel like it type thing?
Yeah, I think it was just like I just stopped understanding why I was taking it, because
Yeah.
I was like, I wasn't like not, it wasn't that I was like not sad anymore. It was like, no, I'm happy. Like I'm starting to be happy.
That's
So
nuts.
I
Yeah.
don't think I need this anymore. And I remember a few months later just mentioning, to the group or whatever, that would hang out together, that I had stopped taking them. And that people were like, what? It's like, yeah, I feel great. And and yeah, so that all happened. That was amazing. And then from there, it's just been this uphill frickin' battle against, like, that's when now all of a sudden, because I read this book, um, now I'm part of this.
Yeah.
Because I know John Lenhart, now I'm part of this.
Yeah.
And at that point, it had ramped up from just that one church to like,
The
we're
persecution
like,
was
yeah,
rampant at that point.
yep.
You're getting
And
the healthiest, you're getting individually the healthiest you've ever been. And
I
on
was
the
losing
outside,
friends because of it.
externally, the churches that were supposed to be helping you are the ones who are
Yeah.
attacking you now.
Yeah. It's like, you motherfuckers, like screw you. Like, you got paid to do this. Like, and you couldn't help. And I get it. And I don't even blame them, because it's like, I don't blame them for that, because I, I don't feel like that information's available, was available to them.
Right.
Like, that's not what they got taught. And they paid money to go to school to get taught. Like, they were doing the best they could. So I'm not even mad about that. What I'm mad about is when those pastors had the opportunity to go, wait, somebody that was at my church that was depressed is doing better now. What book was that? That's great. Like, can I read? And instead, nobody read the book. They decided John was the frickin' devil.
Yep.
And anybody associated. So I lost tons of friends because of this.
Yeah.
Like my mom, my mom knew how bad I was doing, and my mom would like resented John, resented so many of my new friends, even though she saw I was doing better than I've ever been doing. I was treating her better. I was taking responsibility for my actions. And she was mad about it because she was resentful that she wasn't the one that could help me. And we're great now. We're doing really good now, you know,
Oh, and
but
she's a great part of our community. It's a really, that's a whole other story of repair that's been,
yeah.
divinely inspired.
Yeah. So, but for that, for 7 years, I was getting crap from my mom about this. And it just blew me away because now not only was it like, yeah, that's great. That helps you. Good for you. It was like, it helped. Yeah. Anyways, you
People
get
are
it.
against it and warning others against it too.
Oh, so yeah.
So
So
then
my,
it becomes this cycle of you have people who are against you and your friends in your church,
Mhm.
and their evidence for it is they heard it from someone else.
Right. And they won't read the book. They won't like, and one of the people who had gone to San Damiano and who I'd known through church and blah, 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 he was my manager at Starbucks. And I met my wife, Elena, when we worked together at Starbucks. And we had been dating for maybe 6 months at this point. And he did not like John. And he did not like this book. He did not like all this stuff. And he pulled Elena aside and just and said, warned her like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I just want to let you know you should be really careful around these people." And Elena just said, "Well, why? Why are you? What do you mean? Why?" And couldn't give her a why. He just said, just be careful. That's all. It's like
Just so slimy.
it's just dragging somebody through the mud, and you can't even tell them why.
No.
If you cared about them, wouldn't you tell them why? What they
Right.
should be avoiding and be scared of? And and now that guy lives 3 doors down from me, and I have to walk by him every day. It's like every time, like I went from being so excited to talk about this truth that I'd learned that had helped me to like now every time I meet anybody who says they're a Christian, anytime I walk up to a customer's house for my new job in sales and I start talking to somebody and they're like, "Yeah, I go to church. Where do you go to church?" And I tell them the name of my church. I'm half expecting to never hear from them again because that's how our
Immediately it
reputation
puts
is.
my caused me to put the guard up. Like, what are they gonna say?
Yeah. And so it's just, I was helping lead a youth group with these kids in Nina.
Yeah.
Um, and that got broken up because some pastor told one of the moms there
Yep.
that you should stay away from these people. And these kids were like, they were 4 years from where I had been when I got this help.
You got
Like,
high school kids who are excited to do a Bible study.
but do
Who's
a Bible study and just talk about, they were just sharing about their
yeah.
issues. It was legit like that, the setup and the layout I shared about that Baptist church, the youth group.
Yeah.
Only now they were getting answers.
Yeah.
And these kids were loving it. And like they'd come, share about stuff, get help, and it was amazing. And then it all just stopped because some pastor warned one of their moms that these people, if they listen to this, they're going to end up going to hell. And it was just like it's just been there's so many stories like that, and
Yeah.
yeah, but despite all that, it's like I wouldn't change my life for anything. This the work we've gotten to do and the people we've gotten to know in Scotland at Relight Church, the people that we're helping at Music of Life Church. Um, it's all so worth it. The life I'm living, the life I have, the all like how much healthier my relationship is with my wife
Yeah.
because of all the help we've gotten. Like I don't think we ever even would have got married because because we didn't know how to communicate with each other.
Right.
And we've learned how to do that. It's like my life is so much better. I I wouldn't change it for anything. And it just breaks my heart that there's all these people sitting in church pews that I know have the same questions I did. And I know that they are probably not going to get the answers to them. That, and anyways, so that's my story.
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredible knowing you for 19 years and seeing your growth. I remember some of those early days hanging out, and you would have a hard time sharing a story at all. Just like your brain just running so fast. It's like, how do you land, right? And to where you are
Golly.
today, to being able to work with you the way I have. And I definitely want you on again because I'd love to have the story of like what was it like once this church started and to where we are today now. And because I know your story with your mom is incredible, your story with Elena is incredible, and even just your story of over the last couple of years. I think you and I similarly have gotten to a point where we're starting to repair within ourselves even this idea, like this hesitance we have to share this information because
Right.
of the trauma we experienced. I think we're beginning to break through that and be more bold. And yeah, I think there's a lot more to unpack here, but dude, thank you so much for sharing today. I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks.
Cool.
I was a little nervous when you know somebody for 19 years to tell them the story of her life. It's like, yeah, I get it. I've heard this before, but we got into some stuff I know you probably haven't heard, and
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
it
this is
feels
great.
good to tell the story every time. So thanks.
Yeah, it's very helpful. It builds my faith. So thanks, Simon. We'll see you later.
Yep. Have a good one. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, I appreciate him being on this show. He'll have to be on again for sure. So let's dive into his story a little bit. There's a few things I really want to unpack and dig into a little bit deeper here. Number one, he went to a Baptist church. I also was a Baptist kid. And one of the things I remember doing very young, same, around the same age Simon was doing this, 4, 5, 6 years old, was the sinner's prayer, asking Jesus into my heart, whatever that means, right? I remember doing this every week when I was a little boy. I'd ask Jesus into my heart, be my savior every week, every chance I got. And I remember one of the leaders of the church telling me I didn't have to do that and was never really given any answer other than once saved, always saved. But I thought, well, what's the detriment to, if you can't tell me I shouldn't do it either. Clearly, I was feeling guilty about or unsettled about certain things. So I felt compelled to keep doing it. And now, part of Simon's story really kind of stood out to me is like when he has this experience at youth group where he's kind of told, God knows all your sins, all your future sins, and you've already essentially been forgiven for all of them as well. Simon did like a whole cool. So all the things I've done wrong, I'm okay. And all the things I ever will do wrong, I'm okay. And it's kind of like this free pass, right? I feel like, unfortunately, that's a big part of this unmerited favor doctrine that people believe grace is in the church today. That, just God covers all your sins and there's no responsibility that you have as a Christian to walk with him. And what it really becomes about then, this free pass mindset, is it becomes about me getting forgiveness from God. And it doesn't ever focus me on growing and walking with God, becoming more sanctified, not just being forgiven for the sins I keep committing. So that's kind of the flaw I saw in what Simon was advised in by his, youth pastors or the leaders of his youth group. It's unfortunate a lot of kids are being taught the same stuff that essentially once you ask Jesus into your heart, you're good. Where's the emphasis on sanctification? Another thing that Simon talked about was this church he had went to that was really a safe place for him to share his emotions. He had some great people that were surrounding him that would hear about his pain of his dad having died and the struggles and confusion he was feeling, which is great. But ultimately, if we're not being given answers that help us make sense of these things and that help us grow as men and women, those safe places end up becoming enabling. And really, those safe places become unsafe if we can't get the answers that we need to intentionally live our lives with purpose and growth. Now, God is safe because he is strong. God is safe because he has truth. God is safe because he brings nourishment. When all we have is safety and there's no truth, when all we have is cherishing and there's no nourishment, we end up getting enabled. We end up, being able to rationalize and justify our behavior, or people do that for us. And it ends up getting us into a worse spot than we were before. Now, one of the pivotal moments in Simon's story is his dad dying when he was just 16, and this safety net being gone. I love how he described that. Because essentially, I think a lot of us grow up and our parents, and especially our dads, represent this idea of who God is and how the world works. And a lot of the way our worldview is constructed is through how we see our parents live, and ultimately what our parents believe and what they teach us. So when his dad dies, that safety net is gone. And now all Simon can do is rely on his own worldview, on his own beliefs. And what he found out is his own worldview and his own beliefs had a lot of holes in it. And it caused him to fall into a hole. And his worldview was crumbling around him. He couldn't make sense of the world. Now, he found sense. He found the answers he was looking for. And now he's able to tell this story in a way that helps other people and doesn't just enable them to feel like it's okay to stay in your confusion, to stay in your trauma, to stay in your depression, but to recognize it's okay to have those things, but there are answers out there. Those answers are available to you that will help you overcome those issues and help you live a life where Simon says, even in the midst of a lot of persecution, a lot of attacks, he's happier than he's ever been. And he keeps getting happier every year. I can say that I've seen him grow happier and more joyful in the midst of a bunch of crap going on around the scenes. I love this question that he feels like God gave to him. The first time Simon believes that he heard God's voice was when God said, "What have you done to seek me?" I love that. So that's a question I'd like to leave with you all. What have you done to seek God? What's one thing you have done? Let's find it. What is the one thing? Have you read the word? Have you prayed? Have you sought counsel from spiritual leaders and mentors? But here's where the rubber hits the road. What's one way you could do better? What's one thing you haven't tried yet? What's one way you could be wrong in how you've sought the Lord? So that's it today on Unlocked. I'm Dr. Joel Swakowski. You can find Simon on Facebook or on Instagram. Just type in his name, Simon Nielsen. You'll find him there. If you want to hear more of his story, you could reach out to him. I'm sure he'd love to connect. And and if not, you can reach back out to me. Are you sick of not getting the answers to these big questions about who is God? What is salvation? How do these things all work? Why did Jesus have to die? Maybe, like Simon, you'll find answers to some of those big questions that you're asking in Modeling God. If you're interested in reading that book, you can go to modelinggod.com and it's there available for your purchase. Thank you for listening. Keep seeking truth. Keep living it out. We'll see you next time.